Dear listeners and viewers, I'm your host, Jason Johnston Yellen. Can you tell that, Jess, can you tell that I am Jason Neil Patrick Harris Johnston Yellen due to my flowing white hair?
Yeah, I was unsure if it was that or if it was maybe nativity season came early in America and you're pretending to be one of the wise shepherds. 50-50. Could go either way here.
Well, we had to get here early. Travel's been difficult. I brought the frankincense. Buddy of mine brought some myrrh. And then there's the third thing. I think it might be just
Gold.
like some maltsters or something. Maltesers.
Yeah. Traditionally, yeah. Jesus was very into Maltesers.
He was very into Maltesers. Here, let me take this off. You know, here's the sad thing, Jess. There are certain people.
Joshua,
yeah,
I was so
me.
confused. Sorry. I always had a sneaking suspicion that you two were the same person.
I know. It's like Michael and LaToya Jackson. People have never seen them together because maybe they were the same person.
It's not really a comparison you two wanted.
Yeah,
could
maybe
be the
not.
Could be Josh and Jason.
It's also not the most like contemporary example. I've just brought an example from 1998. So listen, Jess, and dear listeners and viewers, I almost feel sad for our listeners because they didn't get to see my absolutely impeccable Jason Neil Patrick Harris Johnston Yellen impression.
They can come to the YouTubes and see that.
They can. But I'm gonna give our listeners the opportunity really quickly before we get into the conversation, because we've got this right, tight 35 minutes.
Right tight.
But I wanted to give both our listeners and you, Jess, the opportunity for another impression. Now, you told me before we hit record that you had caught some shit for your, I would call it, wonderful Michael Caine impression.
No, it wasn't.
No, it was not.
I'm actually never allowed to go to England again. I've got an official letter. Don't come here. South of, the border. If you set foot in Carlisle, that's it.
So I'm going to help you with your Michael Caine impression. I'm going to help you and the listeners and viewers with the Michael Caine impression. This is, okay. There's a very specific way to say Michael Caine in the way Michael Caine says Michael Caine. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
2 words. And it's not Michael Caine. 2 words. Go ahead. My cocaine.
Cocaine.
Now all together. My cocaine. There you go. No?
I feel like we're worsening this, Joshua. We're making it worse.
All right. Okay. To be honest, this is not an episode of Extra Extra. This is not an episode of One Nation. This is an episode of Extra Extra where we can't be so extra. We've got to keep it about the news. So here we are.
Got to keep it a tight 35. Thank goodness.
35. So with today's episode, Jason and I mentioned it in our previous Extra where it's the summertime and whiskey news stories they're not so plentiful. So you got to kind of pick and choose. And there's actually a story that we're keeping a keen eye on, and that's Skagit Valley Maltings, who recently shuttered. Now, we got wind of that maybe 2-3 weeks ago whenever it happened, and really not much news has come out since then. So I guess we're going to call that sort of a story that we'll continue to watch. But yesterday, this morning, I was looking through the spirits business, and I saw an article about the GlenAllachie opening up a visitor center to the tune of £600,000 which to my mind seems like an awful lot of money. And then you were so kind to explain to me, Joshua, dear Joshua, that is not an awful lot of money. But I wanted to talk about that a little bit. So I thought what we should do, Jess, is just have a focus on Distillery Visitor Center and what that means for whiskey and the whiskey industry. Sound cool?
That sounds like a great idea.
So the article itself shows up in the Spirits Business, and the article, I think it's just titled, hold on, let me figure this out. It's just titled, GlenAllachie Visitor Center Gets £600,000 Upgrade. And the main interviewee is Tracy Seller, and I don't know if that's a man or a woman, so I'll just say they for now. Unless you know Tracy. Do you know Tracy?
Don't think so. I may have met them in passing.
Okay.
I've met a few of the GlenAllachie staff.
Yeah, I just, I know Ronan and I know Andrew over there, and I've met Billy once and a few other people there, but...
Name dropping. I didn't realize I needed to get out my Panini sticker book of GlenAllachie staff, to which we need to add...
Did I drop something?
Yeah. Ooh! We need to add in the lovely Karen, and we need to add in Juliet, who of course is the ambassador. She's fantastic. So
all right.
There's a whole tribe of them over there. That's a collective of whiskey people's a tribe.
I think so. It's a tribe. Oh, I like that. A tribe called Whisky. They were my favorite rap band out of the 90s. So one of the things that Tracy highlights about the visitor center is they've got a new whiskey bar, and between both the outdoor and indoor space, they can allow 100 people at one time. They're going to continue expanding the visitor center, which sounds like they're going to have a few more people. But have you been to GlenAllachie before?
I have. I've been a couple of times. I think the last time I was there was December. And we went up and it was very, very snowy. In fact, I wasn't convinced we were going to make it to the distillery because I don't have the world's most practical car for snow. So it was a bit touch and go, but we did make it to the distillery, and they had just cleared all of the car parks. So there was a little space for us to go in and have a little nosy around. But I've been to a couple of times. And this news is very exciting to me because they had a lovely shop that you could try a couple of things in, but I felt like we were just kind of cluttering the place up. So the idea of having like a destination that you can go to, try some things, and obviously that's great news for the distillery because that's going to encourage people to buy more stuff. But the idea that you could sit down and try a rack of GlenAllachies all at once sounds like a lot of fun and a very wise decision, I think, now that people are starting to travel more, and after COVID, we're starting to see a lot more of the kind of whiskey tourism come back and people traveling around to visit distilleries and that kind of stuff. So I think that's great news.
I think it's great too. When you were there in December, were they building it out at that time, or had they not even started production?
They could have been doing it secretly. I didn't ask them what their building plans were, but nothing that I saw suggested that they were building a visitor center. So I also think this is pretty fresh news. So perhaps it was rolling in the pipelines somewhere in the back. That wasn't something else conveyed to us. Okay. Yeah, when I told you, £600,000, and you said, it's that's great, and it's going to be a wonderful addition to the distillery, but it's not a lot of money. It seems like a lot, but it's not a lot. And then I was reminded, that Aberfeldy just in 2014, 2015, somewhere around there, spent £2 million on doing their visitor center. Sort of, I think my understanding, sort of broadening that John Deere's sort of blend experience. Yeah. Jason and I went there in 2019, I think.
Okay.
And that's kind of like a whole setup. They have a cinema. They have like a kind of peep into the old blending lab. Like you can see that there was some real money spent there. I also, just in case any of the nice GlenAllachie tribe stumble across us, I'm not suggesting that they're cheapskates and they should have, spent a bit more. But just as a figure, I guess maybe I'm used to seeing some of the announcements where they're really like it's mega heavy investment money. £600,000 to me seems like a very sensible investment. Whereas sometimes you see figures which make me think, I can't even imagine what that sort of money looks like. So the number I threw back at you was this idea that in 2018, Diageo had made an announcement that they were going to spend £150 million across their Johnnie Walker Four Corners distilleries and Princes Street experience in Edinburgh, which when you go to those, you can see like Scary Biscuits money has been spent on these experiences.
Scary Biscuits. So wait a I feel like I need to use that all the time. I still don't even know what I
don't even know where I've got that from, but it's the thing I've said for a long time. Somebody's obviously said that to me once.
Yeah. Scary Biscuits money. I like that. So 150 million pounds. Mm-hmm. Now, Diageo money is quite a bit different than privately held single distillery money. Like I totally get that. You've been to some of the Johnnie Walker ones?
Yeah, I'm trying to take them off.
All right.
Just because I'm really interested in it. So I've done Princes Street in Edinburgh, which is an amazing, very modern take on how to present whiskey to people. Obviously, heavy emphasis on the Johnnie Walker brand and the blends, but they are also telling the story of those component distilleries that make up Johnnie Walker. And I have been to GlenAllachie and Kalila as well, who form part of this Four Corners collection.
So you and I and a host of other people back in 2017 during the Great Isle Swim were at the distillery, and that was prior to any of the construction that they did to build out that visitor center.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question here. Now getting to Kalila Distillery, it's not the easiest thing in the world. You've got that long, weird road you've got to go down. Describe to me the visitor center as you remember it, and if you know sort of the numbers they're expecting to receive, and have they made any changes to the road that gets you down there to help with that?
Yeah, so I don't know about what kind of numbers they anticipate coming over. Obviously, this year for the festival was the first time during the festival that they were open. So the old Kalila, if maybe the listeners / viewers hadn't been, you came down a very steep road that had a really tight hairpin bend, and then you came along the waterfront, and it was kind of the shop. There was a little room. There wasn't much to it. And they had, you could see the buildings, you could see production, and you've got that amazing view across over to Jura. Very pretty.
Yeah.
What they've done now is they've made it so you, that big warehouse, if you remember, as you came down once you've done the hairpin bend, as you come down, that used to be warehousing, and they've taken that all out. That's now the visitor center. And to access that, you actually access it from the top of the hill. So you kind of come down into the top of the building. I'm doing hand signals for people who are listening. But yeah, it comes down the top. So you come in through the top of the building. So I think for accessibility, it's probably a lot better. They still have, for people who need fully ground level access, you can go and park down the front, and there's a lift and they take you up into the building. But for everybody else, they've made it so you park at the top of the hill, which I think is a great idea, because that is a scary hill to come down. And I am a regular driver. If you're visiting Scotland and perhaps you're still getting the hang of like our horrible windy roads, that's taken away. You've got a nice car park, very easy to do. And then they've got a lovely walkway and you come down that building. So you actually get to admire more of what the production area, where the distillery and the still house is. You kind of, as you're walking down, you're sort of looking out into it. And then you come in and they've got a big expanse of a retail, I don't know what you call it, retail experience. And they've got a massive bar, which you can have pretty much the full spectrum of everything Diageo. So obviously there's lots of lovely Kalilas, but it gives you a chance to try other things within the family. And they do like nice charcuterie boards, snacks. And they also do something which I think I'm going to repeat a few times in our Tight 35, which is they are really good and they're very proactively thinking about people who are not drinking. So for me, a lot of the time when I'm going to visitor centers, if I've got lots of lovely friends that come over and want to be shown around, somebody eventually has to be the sucker who is the driver. And I think really what visitor centers, and I hope GlenAllachie have thought about this hard, to me, what makes a great visitor center is something that makes the whole group feel welcome. So not just the whiskey drinkers and the obvious people who are there to drink the whiskey or learn about the brand or, you know, tick off a distillery on their list, but the poor souls, the tortured souls who have to come and kind of either only experience some of it, and if you're lucky, lots of distilleries are really good at driver's drams and, you know, package it so you can go and enjoy that experience and take part in a tour, see production, go to a warehouse, and then they'll give you little samples to take home so you can drink later. Or also just catering for people who have no interest in whiskey. So, sorry, live from Glasgow. Yeah, that's it. They've come to get me for saying 600 grand wasn't enough. Sorry.
Exactly.
It's fine. It's fine. I have a lovely pair of friends, and my friend, he's very interested in whiskey. He's definitely a self-certified whiskey nerd. His wife doesn't drink and has no interest in whiskey. So her evaluation of what makes for a good distillery center is somewhere she can prop up in the corner with a book and have somebody bring her tea and some sort of chocolates and snacks, and really keep the designated driver / the not whiskey person happy. And I think that's some of the best visitor centers I've been to have been really smart, and that's front and center. So places like when I took a group of friends to Ben Riach Distillery as the driver, they were immediately like, we'll get you tea and biscuits, which meant that I was then, you know, stationed so that I wasn't kind of watching everyone being like, so then you're probably going to get friends who are going to order another dram from the bar. Maybe they're going to pick up another bottle because they've had a chance to try a few more expressions. So to me, I think in 2023, a canny distillery visitor center are definitely very aware of that, of offering, not just being like, oh, you don't want whiskey, well, you can sit over there. Yeah. So I think that's really important to me. And all the good places I've been recently offer that. I had a great time at Glendronach. They've done something similar. They've put in a very luxurious bar area, and you can do a couple of different flight options where they have there's a really good one where they've paired it with chocolates, and they were quite happy to let me have the whiskey as takeaway drams. So I just sat and ate the chocolates and stole everyone else's chocolates.
Looking at the picture of the visitor center that they put up on the spirits business, minus the crazy decanters and some of the other sort of historical bits and bobs, and the view across the water, the GlenAllachie Visitor Center has a Bowmore Visitor Center feel to it from the picture. It's very cozy, a bit plain, but not nice and cozy, and a really nice relaxed feel to it. So I'm with you.
I think
was there
quite clean, a clean,
quite clean,
not fussy. Yeah. And I definitely think that's the way a lot of these experiences are kind of moving away from this. Everybody's seen it, the kind of tartan, shortbread tin style imaging, stag type stuff. Yeah. And GlenAllachie have that fantastic view out the back of the distillery. That's the kind of view that you want to sit with a dram, take advantage of the environment. You've got probably the best advisors that you can have, because you've got GlenAllachie staff that can talk to you about what you're drinking and really help you kind of. I think every distillery who are offering this want it to be they're offering you the ultimate. What's the ultimate distillery experience that you can have is to be there enjoying it with the right people around you. And I think it's really smart for them to put one in. Be very cool. It'll be on my list to go and visit.
Let me ask you a question. When I think of visitor centers, I often think of Distillery Visitor Center. I often think of them as places for people to visit, and these people are fans of that distillery, right? They've heard about it. They know about it. They've had whiskeys from that distillery. And so they're going to check it out. I don't necessarily think about it as a place to go. Like, if I hadn't heard of that place, I may not go there. And I'm just sort of, that isn't necessarily me, but I can see some people thinking that way.
Yeah, up in Speyside, they have something called the Speyside Whiskey Trail. I may have phrased that wrong, but it means that, like, in the UK, when you're driving on the roads, you'll probably sometimes see these like brown signs, and they're kind of like tourist or like points of interest. So they're up in Speyside, that it shows you can do I think it's the Malt Whiskey Trail. I think that's the name of it. There's a Malt Whiskey Trail and a Castles Trail. So there's like regular brown signposts, because obviously a lot of these distilleries in Speyside are nestled away in the hills, because traditionally that's, a lot of them have origins of, they wanted to be not on the main drag of a road. They wanted to be hidden away, and because of all the historical, before everyone had licenses, you're all hiding from the excise man. So I think it's quite easy. GlenAllachie is on one of the main roads that you go through when you're driving through Speyside. You turn off then up to the distillery. So it's not too hidden away. And they do have a big brown sign at the bottom pointing you in the right direction. But I guess maybe it depends. I mean, I also don't, from what I've read in the Spirits Business article, I don't get the feeling they're trying to draw in everybody who passes the road. I think they're trying to offer an experience of people who want to get to know the brand, not necessarily people who are driving past being like, another distillery.
I kind of like that.
Maybe they are. I feel like if those people fell into the distillery, they would be made to feel very welcome.
Yes. Yeah.
Obviously, that's an even better audience to have in somebody who's got no perception at all, rather than somebody who's turning up with maybe a notion of what they think they're going to get. But I feel like there's enough movement happening around in Speyside as an example of somewhere where obviously you've got a high density of distilleries in a not massive map space.
Sure.
There's plenty to go and see.
Well, it's interesting. When I first made that statement, I don't know that I was necessarily thinking properly. Like, here we are now. We've just come out of COVID. And people are traveling quite a lot. One thing I hear from every person on your side of the pond that I speak with who's connected to a distillery, they're saying we're getting flooded by visitors. Whether it's a distillery or some other site, there's just a lot of people from the U.S. coming over, a lot of people just from everywhere coming over. And it got me thinking about what we have. Well, I'll speak for Connecticut, where I am. I don't really care about wine too much. It doesn't excite me. I don't seek it out. But there have been multiple times where Haida and I say, we've got nothing going on. Let's do a wine tour. Let's just hit a bunch of vineyards and stop there, get a snack, maybe try a little wine flight. Have another snack so we're not feeling too loopy, and move on and try some more wine, and maybe check out what their vineyard looks like, hear about their practices. Like, it's just a thing to do, even though we don't really care too much about wine. And it's, it's interesting coming from our perspectives, where our livelihoods depend on whiskey and our passions are whiskey based. We may not be the primary target for who GlenAllachie are looking for, or who Kalila and Cardew and the Johnny Walker Experience tours. We're not necessarily the people they're looking for, I guess.
I guess that's why lots of distilleries offer this kind of multi-level of experience. You get your basic £5-10 tour, like, hello, this is a distillery, we make it using these things, blah blah blah. Whereas, like, obviously a busy day in Glasgow today.
There is something happening in Glasgow.
You have a way of like stepping up. Then we've done a few distilleries, or maybe even on this, we're here in Scotland for a while, we've done a couple. We don't want every distillery to go in and be this is what a mash tun looks like. Like, sure, I think as a whiskey geek, it is interesting to see the kind of intricacies of different distilleries, but you're not necessarily going to want to commit to doing a tour in each one. So maybe going into GlenAllachie and being able to sit down and have a flight of GlenAllachie staff picks, or, you know, an experience through different vintages of GlenAllachie. You know, you've still been and experienced what the distillery has to offer without being the people who are kind of, you know, on their 5th tour that week of this is what our still house looks like. So I think it's very, I think the industry is quite clever. They look at lots of different angles. That's not just maybe catering to me and you, but people who are, you know, sliding up and down that scale of whiskey knowledge and whiskey interest. I am getting maybe 2, if not more, requests a week from people being like, hey, I'm coming to Scotland. What should I do? To the point where, and I was talking to Mariella about this of Aaron fame the other week, we're just going to start creating PDF documents and sending them to people. Being like, this is where you go, this is where you stay. There's a guy that we drink at his beer bar here in Glasgow who's fantastic. Runs a little shop called Grunting Growler. He has like a notes thing, and he will airdrop you, because he gets so many people being like, oh, what else should we drink when we're here? You know, what's good to eat? He can just airdrop to you the list.
Ah, that's great.
So Mariella and I were like, we should start. Here's the top 5 distilleries we think you need to see. This is a kind of tour you should book when you're in Glasgow. This is where you should stay. Like, it's huge. Whiskey tourism doesn't just stop at, we went to a distillery and we bought 2 handfills. It's also maybe some of the distilleries have restaurants, like Glenturret has the fantastic connection with Lalique, and they have a Michelin star. So that's very high end. That's not just a snack and a dram. That's you can have a very serious dinner at it. The Diageo ones are offering, you know, like charcuterie platters and cheeses where they've got like pairings. So that's a snack that's not maybe just like a munch. It's a considered pairing. Macallan works with, they've got a couple of chocolate ones, and they've got like a restaurant downstairs as well. So it's not uncommon, I think, for distilleries to think slightly further than, hi, thanks for visiting us. Please buy this bottle. Ciao. Like it's about how to create a positive experience. And not only do they get the bonus of maybe a few more pounds, but then they've created little mini ambassadors who go out into the real world and like, I had a great time at GlenAllachie. You have to go there. So it's a kind of investment in future people who then, when they've returned home to Connecticut or Timbuktu or wherever, and they walk into a store and they're like, oh, that's a GlenAllachie 15. I had such a good time with them. I should grab another bottle.
I love
like
that
it's
either Connecticut or Timbuktu. It's
where else do people come from?
But what you're saying here, I think, is a perfect connection to the folks at Penderyn, right? Where not only did they create a really nice visitors experience for their main distillery, which is just maybe 20, 30 minutes north of Cardiff, they've built 2 other distilleries within the country, giving people 3 places to visit to get that experience to be made to feel special for coming out. And, you know, maybe they grab a bottle, and I'm sure that's important to any distillery or any large company where they're buying a bottle to then open and share with others. But yeah, I think your point's a good one, where they want to create a way in which people come back and say, I've just gone and visited Distillery X, and holy crap, I'm not even the biggest whiskey fan, but that was awesome. And just because of the experience, it makes the whiskey taste that much better. It's kind of like, you know, going to a distillery and you know, going around the warehouses and tasting from the cask. Like, for whatever reason, the whiskey simply tastes better when you're at the distillery in the warehouse and you come back saying great things because the romance of that experience.
Yeah, I think it's a much more, don't know what fancy word I want to use, but the idea is like a tangible, you can pour a whiskey and be like, oh, so I had this and it was poured for me by the senior tour guide, or, you know, like one of the distillery legends who took us round. Like, you know, it's a way of sharing a story, which again, I think is one of the fundamental things whiskey is about, is what sharing experiences. And what better way than if you're going home to either Connecticut or Timbuktu to take your bottle with you and be like, so when I was at Kalila, this is who I spoke to. This is what they told us about this whiskey. You know, and most distilleries will have something you can only pick up in person there. So the only way that you can share this whiskey with your friends was I went to the distillery. And that doesn't matter whether it's, you know, in Scotland or America or Sweden or Wales, you know, like it's a little snippet of a thing you did. I think it's a better version of when I was a child. I used to have to sit through various aunties and uncles showing you their holiday photographs. Physical photographs, children. That is what we actually had. And you'd get another bloody packet with Kodak on it. Oh, yeah, and this is when and this is the rain on days 1 to 16. Like, whereas I think, you know, having a nice whiskey to share with everyone, much more exciting than flipping through. Well, I was gonna actually name an aunt and uncle then at their holiday in France. Yep. So I'm pretty safe. I don't think they're listening, but just in case.
You could just take names from the Roger Rabbit movie and just, you know.
Shit, if I'd been quick enough, that's what I would have done.
You're Jessica Rabbit Lomas. I mean,
I've been hoisted by this. Quick, move on from the horrible holiday photographs. I actually, when I was in Sweden a couple of weeks ago, which we were talking about in the One Nation Under Whiskey podcast, there was a guy who we were sharing jams with one night who had just come back from Wales and had brought his Penderyn bottle that he bought at the distillery to share. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Beauty. What was the bottle?
It was one of the club releases. I think it was in Madeira. It's in a lovely blue box, like a kind of bright blue box.
Yeah,
it's very nice. So I just thought that was really funny. Like having and he had been there. He's like, I've just come back, so this is what I brought back to show people. So there you go. I think it's a way of sharing memories, and I think it's a great way of tying you back into. Like, I think whiskey's quite tribal. That's why it's a tribe of people. People, they form very strong attachments based on, you know, quite often if they had a great distillery experience or, you know, somebody really looked after them. Quite often when you're still like forming your basic whiskey knowledge and your whiskey opinions. Well, I went to, like, one of my friends who's, you know, Bruichladdich till he dies. It's because he went to the distillery and he and his friends were looked after by Bruichladdich all day. Yeah. So they left absolutely converted to the Church of Bruichladdich.
Yeah.
So, and maybe if they had gone to another distillery and they'd had the same treatment, possibly they would have come out being in that camp instead. But it was Bruichladdich they were at. They loved the liquid they were drinking. They just found it really enlightening. They hadn't really liked whiskey on the way in, and they walked out absolutely convinced that whiskey was the bee's knees. So
it reminds me years ago, 2005, 2006. I don't know what year it was, but when my whiskey journey first started, I'd somehow gotten connected to David Blackmore of Glenmorangie and Ardbeg. And he was just really kind to just, you know, take a little time with me and talk to me about Glenmorangie. And it was just someone taking a few minutes to give me a bit of information and help me out. And, you know, Glenmorangie remains one of my favorite distilleries. I think they're producing solid liquid that just, it sits with me. And does it sit with me because it's great? Or does it sit with me because of that experience, or both? I don't know, but I'll always have that connection back to Glenmorangie. Like that's my start in my whiskey journey.
And that's the same for me when I get the mick taken out of me a little bit. For my love of Glenfiddich, it's the same thing. It's because my parents used to take us to the distillery. My non-drinking parents, they go as an interesting demographic of whiskey distillery visitors. My non-drinking parents used to take us to the distillery to do the tour. My mum would pretend she was driving. Spoiler alert, she definitely wasn't driving, but so that they would get the little miniature to take home, because she didn't want to tell them she didn't like whiskey because she's too nice, unlike me. So they would give her the little miniature one and then serve her an orange juice in a whiskey tumbler. And we were like, ha, it's like orange juice flavored whiskey. How we all laughed.
So did your dad drink?
My dad did occasionally drink. He would have a little, I don't have any memories at all of him drinking whiskey voluntarily. Like he didn't even drink our whiskey. So, but they didn't like, if there's a celebration and my mum, you can talk her into a glass of like champagne maybe, but by and large, no. So the idea that they were taking us to this visitor center and this distillery experience was because it was educational, because my parents have no chill. So it had to be educational. You could do it. You could take the kids in. It was one of the few distilleries when I was growing up that let children in. And crucially, as people on holiday from Yorkshire, it was free. But then, of course, that's so that you exited through the gift shop, which we always bought stuff in. By then the kids are hungry, so they needed lunch. So we sat down and had probably a baked potato or something, like there's a way of eking out money if it's not necessarily that we went to the shelf and got a bottle and brought it home with us. So there's additional spend you can work in there. So as a business, it makes sense. And then from the age of about 7 onwards, every year, my mum was like, can you just take her away? And that's because my mum liked that all the tour guides wore kilts.
Take her away.
Just have her.
Just
please
take her away.
Please take her away.
You kept returning somehow though, Jess. They drove as far as Speyside from Yorkshire. It's like, just take her away.
It was a choice between leaving me at the distillery or at the riding stable in Tariff. Like, it was one of like, just please just have space for her in the car taking her home. Like, so I think whiskey tourism is probably much bigger than on the face of it we think about it. It's not just about whiskey nerds. It's about groups of people, like there are lots of tour companies, you can call up and arrange for like a 5-day, 10-day, whatever excursion where they'll take you in like little minibuses around Scotland to tick off, you've got a castle, a loch, a distillery. But there are increasingly also that I've seen them advertising, like whiskey tours, they will take you to distilleries and have arrangements with local hotels and B&Bs. So it's, you just turn up, put yourself on the bus and go, just like our Whiskey Geek tours, that.
Yep, exactly.
They may never have been to Scotland before, but they have a few malts that they're fond of and they want to come to Scotland and see what it's all about.
Yeah, I'm definitely not surprised by whiskey tourism or the increase of it. In fact, like you brought up Whiskey Geek Tours, like 2024 is a year in which I think we want to increase what we're doing with our own tour company. But you mentioned something earlier when you were talking about Glenfiddich and showing up and your mom getting a bit of orange juice in the tumbler and coming away with the little mini and all that. One thing that I'm near certain wasn't happening then, but I know is happening now is as these distilleries are either building out new visitor centers or just making upgrades to their distilleries, period, there's this focus on sustainability, this focus on limiting carbon emissions and so on. And I know it mentions in the article that GlenAllachie has a focus on their sustainability efforts. They're going to be using some of the heat from the stills from the still house to warm the visitor center. I don't think that's new to GlenAllachie. I mean, the distillery was built as a gravity-fed distillery. Like in 67, 68, it was really ahead of its time from the perspective of let's expend less energy to make liquid. So there were actually no pumps in the distillery at that time. It was all gravity-fed, which is part of the reason, like, when you went into the still house and you saw the horizontal condensers, that was part of their efforts to gravity feed their spirit and not have to use pumps and such. But just sort of all around, you hear more and more about distilleries including sustainability and really highlighting it, not just doing it for the sake of having a story, but you've got distilleries like Ardnamurchan and Nickneen, who are making it part of their ethos. Is that something you're seeing beyond?
Definitely, and I also saw it when I was in Finland in May. I went to Kira Distillery, so people will have heard me talking previously about my love for Kira, the rye people, who for my money make the best rye whiskey, period.
KYRO, Kira.
Yeah, but it's got a umlaut on the
O.
Yeah.
Oh. Or ooh.
You have to do it as a Finnish man, which I'm not very good at, as we know, impressions. Moving on. But they had electric vehicle charging at the distillery. I think that's increasingly something you're going to see. Aaron had just put
included.
Yeah, GlenAllachie. Aaron have done it when I was there. I'm trying to think who else I've been to recently. Ardnamurk, and obviously because famously the guys have Teslas, so they need somewhere to charge that. Yeah, these far out guys, I also think they should, until the rest of us are converted to electric cars, there should also be an Ardnamurk petrol station. It's a really long way out. You need to make sure you filled your tank before you get there. I think it's a smart move again, of maybe kind of trying to offset that a lot of these distilleries, when they're in far out places that people have traveled distances to get to, I guess it's a way of kind of thinking about how that works on a more environmental basis. Yes, I think that's a global thing too. If Kira are thinking about that kind of thing, I can imagine there are plenty of other distilleries who also have electric charging options available for visitors. As someone who doesn't have an electric car, it's not something I pay massive attention to. I'm pretty sure Glenfiddich have them. I'm sure all over Speyside they have them.
Sure.
I'm not sure about on Isla whether or not anybody has them yet. There are charging points, but not distilleries that I've seen.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you if maybe they included it in Kalila.
Maybe
with
they
the
did.
new build out.
Not sure. Don't quote me on that. I think it's something we are going to see increasingly as people think about, saving energy. Where can we offset carbon? The reuse of energy that you've just talked about at GlenAllachie, of course, like Bowmore are famous for donkey's years. They've been using their excess heat to heat the swimming pool next door.
Yes, that's. So I knew that was a thing, that remains a thing. That is so cool.
Yeah, pretty cool. And I don't know if I think they stopped it, but Glengarry used to have a greenhouse that was heated using the surplus heat from the still house. They were famous for growing tomatoes at one point, which if you've been to that corner of Aberdeenshire, it's really not hot and sunny enough to justify growing tomatoes. So I suppose if you've got a nice warm greenhouse, that helps with that too.
I'm looking at the clock here and I'm realizing we're dangerously close to our tight 35. I think we might be the skin of our teeth here, but I've got an important question for you. With distilleries in mind and the idea of visiting said distilleries, whether they have a visitor center or not, but the idea of visiting them, do you have a top distillery right now that you want to visit? What's on your bucket list? One that you want to visit?
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, well, yeah. I really want to go see Talisker because I know they have put a lot more money in, although that's not one of the four corners. I know that they've done a lot up there. And the last time I was on Skye, I was definitely not old enough to be drinking. So I'd like to go there. And I really, 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 really want to go to the Harris distillery because my grandparents lived on Harris and it's been a while since I was back up there. And that distillery is built as you come in on the ferry to Tarbert, the whole way in to the harbour, the distillery is over the top. So you're kind of looking at it. So I think that would be pretty cool. They've just started offering more tours. They have a beautiful looking visitor centre where they've got local people doing, again, food and crafts. They have a great tie-in. Obviously, they're making their very famous Harris gin, but they work with a lady who's she does aromatics. So during lockdown, she was making amazing hand sanitizer using the gin and some herbs. Ooh. She's called AS Apothecary, Amanda Smith, I think it is. So I would like to go back and see that because I'm also part of the original Founders Investors Club. It's called the 1916, and that's a reference to Harris of the original 1916 people, 1,916. So that's really high on my list that I want to go to, especially while the weather's better. But for those of you who are coming to Scotland, you'll realise pretty quickly that our ferries are in a lot of trouble at the moment. So I need to do it when I don't have critical time deadlines to be on and off a remote Hebridean island. So those are my two that I can think of with immediacy, but I've got like an ever-growing list. Like while I'm up there, I might as well go do Knockneen and do like Rassi and, like come around the top.
Oh, yeah. Yep. I hear you.
Which I think would be pretty cool. But then, of course, just before COVID happened, like literally the week that they shut the borders, we were supposed to go to Kentucky and do the Bourbon Trail. So my whiskey list isn't just... That's Scotland, which seems easy-ish. I would love to reschedule and do Kentucky.
So
because I think that'd be really cool.
So, I agree. You need to do that. Like the Bourbon Trail is awesome. Now, I haven't visited all of them, but apropos to this conversation, Wild Turkey were updating their visitor center as well. So, I don't know if it's completed. Maybe it is, but that's something that I'm really keen to check out as their new visitor center. I'm desperate to get to a distillery you have been to already, and that's Ardnamurchan Distillery. I've said it here before. I'll say it again. They have made my top 5 distilleries list.
Is that a definitive? Definitive list.
That is a definitive list. Top 5 distilleries.
Okay.
I absolutely love their spirit and what they're doing. I also think that they're cool people. I like their story. Most importantly, I like their liquid. So I want to check that out. And I'm really keen to get to Highland Park, in part because of the distillery, but mostly because I'm just desperate to get up to the Orkneys. Like I want to go to Stones of Stenness. I want to go there. I want to visit Scapa. Maybe I just want to go to Orkney and just experience what Orkney has.
And then go get your picture taken under the sign for twat, right? Because that was like the 3rd thing I did on Orkney.
Of course.
In fact, they get that sign stolen so much that actually in Kirkwall they have like a whole heap of merchandise you can buy with the sign on it, so you don't need to steal the sign.
For our viewers and listeners that don't know, on the Orkney Islands, the name of the town, what is it again, Jess? From your mouth to God's ears?
With 2 T's, so I'm not saying anything bad.
Twat. Oh.
You've never been to Orkney? That does surprise me.
Yeah, I've just, it's one of those places, it just takes the extra effort. And if I'm being honest, every time I've gone, not every time, but the majority of times I've gone to Scotland have been with Jason, and he's just never added that to the itinerary. And then the times when I've not been on tour with Jason, it's been Impex related. And there's no reason for me to visit there because I don't import either of those distilleries. So,
and it's a little bit further away from Darlington than you'd like. That's an in-joke, listeners. Maybe we'll tell you in a pub one day.
Maybe. You know what? I think that's a perfect place. Because actually, I just saw we just hit our 35 minutes. So that was a perfectly timed jab at me.
It's revenge for the Michael Caine impressions.
Michael Caine. So, dear viewers, dear listener, firstly, dear Jess, the co-rabbit Lomas, thank you so much for being my co-host yet again. It's a pleasure having you, and I'm hoping Jason goes on holiday a bit more because it's just cool hanging out with you.
We should suggest he goes on holiday. He could go to Orkney and report from... No, we should go to Orkney.
Yeah, we should go to Orkney.
Back.
Deal.
Okay,
yeah.
sounds
Fist
good.
Bump. So just want to remind people, speaking of driver's drams, as you mentioned before, anytime you're drinking, please drink the whole bottle responsibly. That's what we always like to say.
It's very important.
Most importantly, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you are a watcher, please comment below. And most importantly, Jess, what should they be doing?
You have to. So this I've been meaning to bring up for some time. You have to smash the subscribe button, but also importantly, you have to ring the little bell, which is down here somewhere, because then you get notifications when our things are released.
Ring the little bell that's below. Is that what you said?
Next to the subscribe button, there's a bell. So when you hit it, it does a little, like you've rung the bell.
That, I I didn't even know that was it. When did you find out that was a thing?
Dude, I'm part of the youths on the YouTube.
You are a youth.
This is a consistent phrase that, and I'm not telling you where I'm subscribing on YouTube because they're not half as exciting as you think, but also I'll out myself as being a complete nerd. But yeah, that's the thing. You have to smash the subscribe button, ring the little bell to get the notifications of when our new episodes drop.
All right, so now I've got to create a new banner that says, smash that subscribe button and ring that bell. It sounds naughty. It all sounds naughty.
That's the point. That's how you remember to do it. You're like, oh, I should. You can get like a rolling banner that says it for you. Don't know how you make that. I'm not that good at the YouTubes.
Well, I'll figure it out. All right. Jess, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks,
listeners, viewers. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll be welcoming Jason back in our next episode of One Nation Under Whiskey, and then of course on Extra. And until then, Jason and I always like to say, and Jess, I'm hoping you'll join us as we get out of here. We just say peace.
Peace.